We are ready to begin our program. I want to welcome all of you here today. Thanks for coming out. We are here to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Hotel Jamestown. It was 100 years ago, this New Year's Eve, that the Hotel Jamestown opened for business. And it was right here in this room, in the Crystal Ballroom.
I need to go back to that celebratory night, December 31st, 1924. How special it was in another way. The Jamestown Evening Journal on January 1st, 1925 reported this: modern invention served to advertise the opening of the hotel by means of the new broadcasting station in Jamestown. The orchestra music and the rest of the program was spread far and wide over the country for the benefit of the radio fans. Those who turned in Jamestown heard the brief speeches better than those in the room. Radio broadcasting in Jamestown began simultaneously with the new hotel on New Year's Eve, 1924. Just a few days before, December 27th, local entrepreneur Archibald E. Newton, Archie, had received U.S. government permission to turn his experimental radio station, 8DIS, into a full-time one, WOCL. We're on Chautauqua Lake. Had there been no hotel, there might have been no radio station, at least not at that time. A newspaper article in the Jamestown Sun years later suggested Newton only expected a temporary license to broadcast the opening of this hotel. Instead, he got and held a full broadcasting license. Newton's transmitter was located in the basement of his house at 840 North Main Street. Following that initial broadcast from this Crystal Ballroom, Archie had studios all over town: Jamestown Baking at 8th and Main, the Eagles Temple, the Mission Church, possibly others. 12 years after Archie Newton got into the radio business, he got out of it. WOCL was sold to a group of experienced broadcasters from Syracuse. The call letters were changed to WJTN. The transmitter was removed from Newton's basement and established in the swamp off Jones and Gifford Avenue, where it remains today. There is evidence Archie Newton struggled in the radio business, particularly in the 1930s, the time of the Great Depression. The new owners had resources to invest in the station. One of their changes was to bring the radio station back to where it had all started, here in the Hotel Jamestown. WJTN moved into the front section of this, the second floor of the hotel, in the fall of 1939, and remained here until leaving for Orchard Road, the current location, in 1971. It is worth noting that one of the people who came with the Syracuse team was a salesman, a quite successful one. He eventually became manager and later owner of WJTN. His name is worthy of mention: Si Goldman. Si led WJTN through its most successful years on the air. His son, Mike, joins us on the panel today.
I'm going to start out and piggyback a little bit on what Dennis talked about the radio station, because it all starts in 1939 when a group from Syracuse known as Newhouse Broadcasting bought the radio station. At that time, there was a 21-year-old kid from Carthage, New York, who had gone to Syracuse University and had also graduated from what would become Newhouse School of Communications. He then went to work for a radio station up there, WSYR, owned by, guess who? The same company, Newhouse Communications. And since he was a young kid and he was single, they sent him to Jamestown, New York. And of course, he was a resident of Jamestown, New York, until he passed. So, but after that, about 9 years later, 1948, some of his relatives got him together with a woman who was my mother. And her last name was Finer, but that's not the important thing. My maternal grandmother's maiden name was Sherman. Now it turns out, speaking of boxing, that there was a magazine out of New York City called Ring Magazine. And the editor was a guy by the name of, I believe it's Ned Sherman. Could have been Nat Sherman, but I don't mind me. As I said, I'm 74 years old. I have Alzheimer's. So I don't remember everything well. So my father met all of these people. So that's where this New York City connection came from. And only other thing I'm going to add to what's been said before, because Dad not only owned a radio station in Jamestown, New York, he owned one in Erie, Pennsylvania. And not that the name Art Kellyan would have it mean anything to anybody, but Art thought this idea of a sports dinner was great. So he set up a sports dinner in Erie, Pennsylvania. So for a period of time, an athlete could go to the Hickok dinner on, let's see, was that on Sunday? Monday was here? Is that, am I right on that?
Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday was here.
Tuesday was here. Monday in Rochester, thank you. I thought we weren't gonna, oh, never mind. So it was Monday in Rochester, Tuesday here, and Wednesday in Erie. So it actually became a three time. They got three shots at the dart. Hey Dennis, when did your father start at WJTN? Was it anywhere near 39?
1951.
Oh, a little later. Okay, sorry about that. So I have, Dennis and I were talking because I have some really great memories. Of my father and his father.
As do all of us, and there's a long legacy and legend of the WJTN. And of course, Si Goldman being the program chair. He's never the chair of the dinner. There was other people he let do that, but he was sort of in charge of the talent. And as Mike indicated, how they would manage to finesse the Hickok Award as the premier one, get him to Rochester, and then get that on Monday, get them here. He would pay them, of course, a little bit less, to give them a little bit more. So it was a way to get the talent all the way through the talent itself, saying, all right, I'm making a few more bucks by happening to get a few more days of just floating around in western New York and northwestern Pennsylvania. Because I want Dennis to share, because we all have our memories here of Aunt Jemima breakfast. That's what came to mind quickly. Ray Wheeler, and he'd have the Boy Scouts activities here, and there were all kinds of masquerade balls that I can recall as well. So, Dennis, there's so much WJTN. Have at it.
As I think both Mike Goldman and I have suggested to you, and the hour is getting long, so I will just say this as an introduction. You have heard, and we'll hear a little more of the tip of the iceberg, but there is a rich trove of story about this room, this floor of the hotel, Jamestown as a community, the relationship of fathers. To sons, but two things that relate specifically to this room and this floor of the hotel. And one of them was brought to my memory recently by Frank Bessie, a member of the board of this. Coleman Hawkins, famed saxophone player, was in one of those events that Dr. Burt Rappole was just talking about, was hired here along with some other famed musicians for the 1958 annual Chi Sigma Chi Sweethearts Ball. Now, one of the instrumental young people in organizing that event was Herb Meiselman. I wish that Jim Roselli, famed announcer at WJTN, was still alive to tell the story, because he knew the detail better than I, because he was actually with the statement in that time period. But Herb was not only a high school student at that time, but had some relationship and possibly was one of the young employees at WJTN. So, from this room, because the radio station was close by, and the activities that happened here that were sometimes broadcast, there were microphone lines that went from this room and dropped over in the hotel studio. So Herb bootlegs this concert, this performance by Coleman Hawkins. And it was held in the family for decades. Finally came out in this century as a CD. You can still buy it online for $32 or $33. I don't know that Hawkins ever knew he was recorded. If you listen carefully, and I've not heard the digital remaster, but the original, I understand, you could hear the musicians talking about how cold it was and what they were being paid for the gig and all of that stuff. And Meiselman is on there too, along with another student announcer, and he took the tapes and held them, and they were eventually made into this CD. Young guys doing sneaky things in this, your wife is laughing. Young guys working for the radio station doing sneaky things in this building never ended. There were 4 elevators, often not tended, late in the night. They were the subject of some interesting, I better stop. Second story, and I'm glad I'm on this platform, and I'll just point to the man standing in this picture here, the one closest to my right, is J. Ralph Carlson. He's a legendary figure in Jamestown radio as well, going back many, many years to the station's origins. He was the program director of WJTN for some time. Ralph was one of the original hosts of the Saturday Breakfast Party program. Again, lines through the building. The program started downstairs at the coffee shop, eventually expanded to the main dining room, the colony room downstairs, because so many people wanted to be on the radio for this program from 9 to 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. A program which in subsequent iterations I shepherded along for more than 40 years. Now, Christmas time, J. Ralph would suddenly become ill and be unable to be on the show. But they would move it from downstairs to this room. And Santa Claus, J. Ralph couldn't be there that day, Santa Claus would appear in a chair in this room and greet young people. The program at that time was called Breakfast with Biglows. Now the Biglow family, if you do some of the research, was part of the original group that built this building. They were right next door with their department store. Breakfast with Biglows was a sponsor-owned radio program. They did all the advertising, provided gifts for all the people who attended the show and were celebrated. So, Christmas time comes, Ralph is Santa Claus. The room is filled with kids and families. Down the door, down the stairs, to the front. So many kids wanted to send it over to Biglows for more stuff, because they had more kids coming in wanting stuff and greeting Santa Claus. And they were extraordinary successes. I do not know, I interviewed J. Ralph about this more than 40 years ago. I do not know how many years they did that, but for a few. And then they had to stop because they were breaking the bank. But this room was alive with kids and Santa Claus, and it was a whole radio show. Now, there are many, many more stories, and the hour is late. I will not get into them, but if you ever want to know, I'd be happy to spend some time with you about what some of the rest of them are. But thank you very much.